Was Jahdae Barron simply too special for Sean Payton, George Payton, and the Denver Broncos to pass up in the first round of the NFL draft? When will they address the running back position, which as of this point remains uncertain? Are the Denver Nuggets kind of on the brink of a unraveling here, not just in the NBA playoffs against the Clippers, but as a franchise and where they're projected to go going forward? And can the Colorado Avalanche pull something together to try to regain some confidence and control of this series with the Dallas Stars? All things to come on today's rundown, including a little bit of, I suppose, a guessing game as to where Buffs quarterback Shedeur Sanders is going to go. But we begin in the world of the NFL, where the Denver Broncos, who had needs at running back and tight end and defensive tackle and even wide receiver, and yes, cornerback to a certain degree, but they in some ways shock the NFL draft a little bit with the drafting of Jahdae Barron out of the University of Texas at the cornerback position with the 20th overall pick. So all of the hoopla and the speculation and the mock drafting from all the experts of Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah and Dane Brugler and you name it, nobody, and I mean nobody, in the countless mock drafts that I saw, and if there are ones out there who had it, just accept my apology in advance, but I don't think anybody had Jahdae Barron falling to number 20 and therefore being an option to select for the Denver Broncos, which is exactly how the board fell. And it really started with the number 2 overall pick, the chaos of the Cleveland Browns moving up from 5 to 2 to select wide receiver corner Travis Hunter. He gets to return to his home state of Florida, playing in Jacksonville, and Ashton Genty slides outside the top 5, which up until draft night was pretty rare to see him fall later than 5 to the Jags. So he slides to 6 for the Las Vegas Raiders. Colston Loveland, the love affair that Sean Payton was having from a distance with the tight end prospect, is going to have to wait for several more breakups, I would imagine, before they ever get a chance at rekindling, because Colston Loveland goes 10th overall to the Chicago Bears, not Tyler Warren, the standout out of Penn State, who, as it's come out in the days, in the hours or so since the draft, that there were maybe a lot more people who were high on Loveland and lower on Warren than we maybe thought. So Colston Loveland goes to the Bears, Tyler Warren falls to the Colts, and the board is just shifting, the draft board at this point. And it comes down to number 20 and Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina, who is universally considered the number 2 running back prospect behind Ashton Genty in this draft class. He's sitting right there. He's sitting right there. And I was live, as hopefully many of you saw. We did the rundown live from the Sportsbook Bar and Grill DTC while the Broncos were on the clock, leading up to the pick, and while they were on the clock, and then capturing some reaction from you all afterwards. I said it then. This just screams Omarion Hampton. The stars were aligned. Everybody's predictions and projections were lining up. And then the pick is in, and I had it spoiled for me, unfortunately, like a minute or two before the TV screen announced it, and my jaw almost hit the floor because it was so not on my radar that Jahdae Barron would be there, and that was the most pressing position of need. But let's not forget what George Payton and Sean Payton said during their pre-draft presser before all this got going was in respect to needing a running back and having to fill that void left by Javonte Williams. George Payton was adamant, and Sean Payton was adamant, that they are not going to step over the crystal to get a blender just because they need a blender. The blender in this situation is the running back. And yes, there are good running backs and deep running backs in this class. Ashton Genty may be the figurehead of the group, and there may be a drop-off before you get to Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, blah, blah, blah. But that is the blender. Jahdae Barron is the crystal. This is a player who was a consensus All-American in 2024. He was the number 1 graded cornerback in coverage by Pro Football Focus in all of college football last year. And on Daniel Jeremiah and others' big boards leading into draft night, Jahdae Barron was as high as a top 10 overall prospect in the draft. So you had a situation where George Payton has loved to find himself in years past, where there was an opportunity to draft a player, similarly to how it fell with Patrick Surtain, who is a consensus top 10 talent in this draft that fell all to you at pick number 20 because of need and reach and circumstance and fit. And it was impossible in George Payton's mind to step over that opportunity to simply draft a position of greater need. When asked about it after the draft, George Payton said, it being cornerback is a premium position for one. I've said it before, you can't have enough good coverages. We had a few injuries this year, and we saw what kind of happens. We can't have enough good cover guys. And I think this guy, it was just unique for where he was on our board. I talked about the football player, the playmaker, but he was just too unique to pass up, and corner is a premium position. Now, let's remember, because I think George Payton brings up a good point here. You can say maybe cornerback wasn't the most pressing position of need, but they were going to draft a corner at some point in this draft. And you don't have to think back too long to remember Riley Moss missing time during a stint in the middle of last season and watching Levi Wallace and Chris Abrams-Draine have to fill a void on opposite side of Patrick Surtain, and watching the Jameis Winston-led Cleveland Browns absolutely torch the Denver Broncos secondary once a weakness was exposed and a crack was there to be filled. Okay, this was a situation in the secondary that allowed Jerry Jeudy to have the greatest revenge game for a wide receiver in NFL history, going for over 200 yards with very little, if any, resistance from a coverage standpoint. And again, Patrick Surtain is great. Okay, he is the defensive player of the year. He is an all-pro level NFL corner, and I think he is well on his way to moonwalking into the Hall of Fame, as our friend Zach By likes to say. But if you have the standout corner on one side and not enough reliable options on the other side, it mitigates and really waters down the effect that standout corner can have when offenses can just eliminate that side of the field and go the other way and find success doing it. So while this wasn't maybe perhaps the most sexy position to address or the most pressing position of need as a team, I'm hesitant to hate on the pick too much because of evidence that we saw just in this past season and the fact that they still have an opportunity to draft a quality running back in theory today. Omarion Hampton went just 2 picks later to the Los Angeles Chargers, which, by the way, now you've got Ashton Genty with the Raiders, Omarion Hampton with the Chargers. There's going to be a lot of smash mouth football in the AFC West this year, if anyone had any curiosity about that. But Travion Henderson, the standout running back out of Ohio State, still available. His backmate, Quinshon Judkins, out of Ohio State, still available. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. Devin Neal out of Kansas. DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. How about Dylan Sampson? Kind of a name that we, haven't talked about maybe as much as those other guys out of Tennessee, the same college that Alvin Kamara went to, by the way. As another option, the Broncos are picking at 51. I imagine 2 running backs will be off the board at 51. Does Sean Payton trade up and George Payton trade up into the higher end of the first round to be able to select their pick of those running backs I just named? I don't know. I think they were looking to pick to trade up in this first round of this past round, but once Colston Loveland went off the board at 10, maybe that killed the love affair and there wasn't as much, it's hard to get up the same level of excitement for your second choice on a date. But so whether they trade up or not, one of those backs that I just mentioned is going to be there, if not 2, 3, or 4 of those backs that we just named. So I understand some of the questioning and the speculation and perhaps the frustration with this pick from Broncos country because of other glaring needs that are on the roster. But If they walk away with Travion Henderson, if they move up in the second round and draft Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins, or maybe they stand pat and they can get a Caleb Johnson or a Dylan Sampson or a DJ Giddens, maybe a Devin Neal, and they will have solved both positions of need like that, which are positions of need in the first 2 rounds, maybe that helps soften the blow a little bit. I think if you had said that in the first round, the Broncos are going to walk away with a cornerback, a defensive tackle, and a running back, and the order was fluid at which they were going to address those positions of need, but they were going to get 3 guys they like at those 3 positions of need in the first 3 rounds, I think a lot of us would take that. So let's take a beat. Let's see how this one pans out tonight. They'll have a couple of picks tonight to be able to address, running back, perhaps a defensive tackle, or who knows, based on the unpredictability of the first round, maybe they'll be looking at a safety, or they'll be looking at we had some snarky people, some of you out there talking about how we got to keep them on punter watch in the second and third round. So it is hard to, and not to overuse the crystal and blender analogy that Sean and George Payton used, but it is hard to fault a front office, a coach, and a GM for finding a top 10 caliber player, a consensus top player in the draft that fell 10 picks beyond expected and taking advantage of that. You could say, if you wanted to take a negative spin, you could say, this is what happened with Bradley Chubb. John Elway never expected Bradley Chubb to get there at number 5, so they had to pick him when Josh Allen was still on the board, and the Broncos didn't really have a significant option at quarterback currently on the roster. I don't think that that's the case, and I think that having a quarterback in Bo Nix allows you to maybe make some of these other picks that are more luxury in nature. When it comes to addressing the running back position, Sean Payton and George Payton did address that future need last night in their post-draft press conference when they said, quote, "You never know. We feel pretty good that we'll get a runner in this draft. There's just a lot of them. If there's not, then we'll sign one after the draft. They'll sign as a free agent." And okay, I know I just kind of went on one hand and said, hey, don't shade too much on this Jahdae Barron pick because they can still get a quality running back. Look at the names I brought up, from Travion Henderson to Quinshon Judkins to Caleb Johnson to Devin Neal to DJ Giddens to Dylan Sampson. All of those players are currently still on the board and available, and several of them, if not most of them, could be on the board when the Broncos pick, even if they stay at 51. But I want to be a little careful. I would be a little careful there, George Payton, with the flippancy with which you want to refer to the need at the running back position, to just say, yeah, we feel pretty good about, what we got and that we're going to get a runner in this draft, whether it's bada boom, bada bing. You need a running back, and you need to nail that pick at running back, whether you pick him in the first round, second round, third round, wherever you get this guy, whoever you choose, you got to nail it. Because don't give me the fact that the Broncos were middle of the pack as a rushing offense this past year. I think they came out at 16th in yards per game. They were abysmal. Okay. Bo Nix's legs masked a lot of deficiencies just to get them to that 16-17 ranking in the NFL among the 32 teams. Javonte Williams was completely ineffective in every way except pass blocking, which is why we had to keep seeing him trot out there over and over again. Jaleel McLaughlin showed flashes of burst and speed and playmaking ability, but from a size disadvantage standpoint and schematically with what Sean Payton wants to do, he doesn't profile as a true joker type player or a 3-down, every down back that can be used in a multitude of different ways. And Audric Estime, by and large, was pretty disappointing, other than getting the majority, the lion's share of the carries in the waning moments of the Kansas City Chiefs game in crunch time, a game that ended with the blocked field goal. There wasn't a lot of trust and faith in Audric Estime, to the point where he wasn't even getting a jersey toward the end of the season and the postseason. So don't be so flippant to the situation of getting a running back, because the difference between getting an Ashton Genty and a Marion Hampton and perhaps getting a DJ Giddens or a Dylan Sampson or a Caleb Johnson or a Devin Neal, it could be huge. You don't know. You probably know better than me, because I'm not a draft talent scout and evaluator, but I think it's fair to speculate that there's a difference in caliber and tier between those two players, however tight or large you may want to make it. That comment from George Payton just rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. And I do think that nailing the pick at running back whenever they choose to address it will reflect positively or negatively on the decision to draft Jahdae Barron in the first round, skipping over the likes of Amari and Hampton. Speaking of skipping over, boy, oh boy, Shedeur Sanders. The Shedeur Sanders slide that at one point this was a young man who was talked about as a competition and a neck-and-neck battle with Cam Ward for the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, okay? And he did a lot of things at the University of Colorado, maybe not enough to warrant most people wanting his jersey retired at Folsom Field, but he did a lot of things, taking over a 1-11 program and bringing them back to relevance alongside his father, Coach Prime. And it kind of felt like, okay, if he doesn't go number 1, if Cam Ward wins that battle, when it became clear Tennessee was really invested in Cam Ward, look at the other teams. Cleveland could take a quarterback maybe if they decide to pass on the likes of a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter. The Giants have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and Tommy DeVito. None of those seem like long-term real quarterback answers for a team in the biggest market in the country. So they could be an option, even if it means trading back up into the first round to get one, which they did. The Saints with Derek Carr's mysterious shoulder injury. And is it real? Is he faking it? Like Diana Rossini seemed to have pointed out or tried to put out there as a report. Are they going to move on from him? Is he going to be too hurt to play? Even if he isn't too hurt to start the season, is he healthy enough to finish the season? The Saints are a perfect team that needs a quarterback. The Jets, who are drafting in the top 12 in the NFL draft, top 10 in the NFL draft, they have Justin Fields as their main option right now after parting ways with Aaron Rodgers in the dramatic saga that unfolded there. They could need a quarterback, right? Surely, if Shedeur loses the battle with Cam Ward for the number 1 overall pick, all those other teams I just mentioned aren't going to scoff or turn their nose up at drafting a quarterback who could have gone number 1 overall and was projected to have a chance at that for a good portion of the pre-draft process. Well, that's exactly what happened. And not only does Shedeur fall all the way outside the top 10, he falls outside the top 20 past the Broncos, where the Pittsburgh Steelers are up on the clock, and they don't have a lot of certainty or stability or skill in their quarterback room. And that was part of the pre-draft conversation that comes to the Broncos, is the Broncos could trade back with a team that wants to get in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers to draft Shedeur Sanders. Well, that doesn't happen. The Steelers got him. He's on the clock. Nope. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon by way of Michigan State. And once he didn't go at 21, oh, baby, you're thinking, okay, it's a team's going to trade back up. The Giants traded back up to 25. It's going to be Shedeur. Nope. It is Jackson with an X dart. And I got to be honest, I didn't think he would make it past 21. When the Giants traded up, I thought for sure that was him. And once it wasn't him, I said, there's nobody else. He is not going to go in the first round. And that is an unbelievable collapsive slide for a guy that was once considered the prospective number 1 overall pick. And I think that my first gut thought and impression was this series of decisions by quarterback needy teams in the NFL in the first round of the NFL draft, where quarterbacks being overdrafted based on situational need because of the value and importance of the position, is so commonplace that it's almost an afterthought. So the fact that Shedeur Sanders not only didn't benefit from that, in the top 10 or 15, but he's not even going in the first round now of the NFL draft. It felt to me like a clear, intentional, and definitive message, a statement being made by these NFL franchises as a collective mind that says, no thanks. We are not interested in the Sanders effect, in the Coach Prime experience, in the Shedeur aura and energy. Thanks, but no thanks. This is the NFL. We don't need you. You need us more than we need you, and we are here to remind you of that. That's what it felt like to me. And you can say fair or unfair, and I think both sides have a little bit of an argument. Unfair in a sense that, hey, Shedeur Sanders, for all of the hoopla that comes with the media circus around Coach Prime and for some of his bravado and his attitude, and I talked about this earlier in the week, it's not as though the guy can't play quarterback. Does he hold on to the ball a little bit too long? Yeah. Do you want to make a big deal out of tapping the football before his throws? Sure, if that's really where you want to go as a scout, as an evaluator, and as a team decision maker. Yeah. Okay. Is he the most athletic guy? Is he Anthony Richardson, like Cam Ward in my mind profiles too? No. But the guy can throw the football. He can process and read a defense at least a level that is enticing to an NFL franchise to be able to take a look at. Okay. But on the fair side of things, the truth is the truth. These NFL franchises don't need Shedeur Sanders more than he needs them to further his career. And let's be honest, as we've seen unfold a little bit with the Deion Sanders saga that's come out in the jersey retirement wake, there is baggage that comes associated with that. And it's self-inflicted wounds, and it's kind of like, baggage you put on yourself, but there is baggage there. And an NFL team with all these grown men making real grown men money, not that the emergence of NIL isn't, making college football more like that, but this is the NFL. These are grown men. This isn't it's not playtime anymore. It ain't intramurals, brother. And there is not there's a part of me that does not fault some of these teams for not wanting to put up with or take a chance that their locker room and their media coverage can be swayed and impacted and needle moved positively or negatively by Coach Prime and Shedeur. And that to me is fair. These guys are private businesses. They can do what they want with their team, and they make a lot of money doing it. And so fair, unfair, I don't know. Shedeur Sanders, do I feel bad for him on a certain level personally? Sure, because again, this was a guy that is trying to make a life for himself and pursue a dream, and in some ways, like a lot of us, just manifesting itself in a more public way. And do I think he sometimes gets hated on a little bit because of his connection to Coach Prime and the bravado and cocky swagger nature of some of the interactions with the media? Yeah, sure. But it's not like Shedeur Sanders is the first player to not get drafted where they thought they were going to go. Okay. Will Levis was a top quarterback prospect in his draft class and slid all the way out of the first round. Lamar Jackson was a Heisman Trophy winner who had to slide all the way down to the end of the first round and was spared only by the Baltimore Ravens trading back up to 32 to select him. Brady Quinn, if you want to go further back, was crying on draft night because of the slide that he continued to have to watch unfold in person. And I think it was smart for Shedeur in hindsight not to go to the NFL draft in person and have to be a part of that where the cameras can just be on you all the time. And he had his little compound at home. But you want to talk about fair, unfair, and maybe some of this being self-inflicted? Look at the reactionary fallout of the situation that Shedeur speaking to no one, essentially speaking to the group of people that was there in a press conference style manner and coming across a little bit tone deaf, in my opinion. When he was speaking to those people, he said, quote, "We all didn't expect this, of course, but I feel like with God, anything is possible. I feel like it didn't happen for no reason. And all this is fuel to the fire. Under no circumstance, we all know this shouldn't have happened, but we understand we're on to bigger and better things. Tomorrow's a day. We're going to be happy regardless. Legendary." Okay. And you're thinking, legendary? What is that? Well, legendary is the word that was monogrammed and plastered all over his custom draft compound It was above a bookshelf that was filled with hats of NFL teams that he thinks could draft him, which, by the way, those teams included the Ravens, the Chargers, the Vikings, the Bills, teams that I think last time I checked are pretty good on the quarterback position. But again, we're starting to sense a little bit of a self-awareness thing here. And to tagline your speech to no one with the word legendary to kind of continue a brand that you're trying to build, I think it speaks to a little bit of a tone deafness thing with Shedeur Sanders. And it kind of feels like it's a shift from being like the I don't care what people say or think that comes across in a positive way to a point where it's like, maybe you should have a little bit more awareness of how things you say and do are going to be received, because those actions impact your future, as we've seen now. And so when I heard that phrase and he finishes his speech about God's plan, and this wasn't supposed to happen, but it's God's plan, which is counterintuitive. And then he hashtags it basically with legendary. You know what my first thought that came to mind was? It sounds like Russell Wilson. It sounds like Russell Wilson trotting up to a podium after a bad loss that shouldn't have happened, and a team that's free falling, we're going 1-5 to start a season. And we're saying, let's ride. Let's ride. Let's ride to where? What is legendary about falling out of the first round? You didn't get drafted by anybody. The team that worked most closely with you and spent the most time with you in the Cleveland Browns, in the New York Giants, passed on you twice, Shedeur. They passed on you at 3rd overall to take a generational type talent like Abdul Carter. Then they traded back up into the first round to take another quarterback that wasn't you. What's legendary about that? And these are just the moments where I'm like, I start to get it a little bit. I'm like, I don't know if I would need that in an NFL locker room. Is an NFL locker room full of grown-ass men going to follow that type of leadership personality? They did at CU, maybe by choice, maybe by force, because Coach Prime is the coach. But I think with the fair or foul, fair or unfair, you can make a case for both sides. And while it is unfortunate, you don't want to see somebody slide the way that it did. And I think that Shedeur Sanders possesses a skill set that can succeed at the NFL level. His path just got a whole lot harder, because khaki pants quarterbacks like Mike Evans likes to champion, they don't get the same amount of leash and leeway and level of commitment that guys in the first round get. And fair or unfair doesn't matter. That's just the truth. So Shedeur Sanders may go tonight. The Cleveland Browns have two of the top 4 picks in the second round. Maybe he goes there. The Raiders have a top 10 pick in the second round. The Jets have a top 10, 12 pick, whatever it is, in the second round. And if he doesn't go there, then the free fall turns into a black hole. And who knows how far down until you reach the singularity at the bottom of that point. Hitting the bottom, I guess, if we're just going to keep stringing this along, hitting the bottom, finding the singularity at the bottom of the black hole, feels like the Nuggets might be zeroing in on that point ever so slowly, or not so slowly in the case of last night, where they got boat raced by 35, losing 117 to 83 to the Los Angeles Clippers in the inaugural postseason game of the Intuit Dome, where their vaunted student section like fan portion behind the basket called The Wall, which last night featured plush horse heads that the fans could wear on their heads in an attempt to distract Nikola Jokic at the free throw line and or at the basket there on that side of the court. Well, it worked, because they got their ass kicked in pretty significant fashion. And the Nuggets, I said when they lost game 2 at home, after sneaking out, it felt like stealing game 1 in overtime at home. After that, squeaking by that, I said they have to win both of these games at home if they want to keep this series competitive. They end up losing another tight game that they probably should have won at home in game 2. And now the series shifts back to LA. So LA got a split that they probably felt they crucially needed. I'm starting to feel like they didn't crucially need it, because once the series shifted to LA, as we saw last night, it was over before it began. The Nuggets couldn't buy a bucket. Michael Porter Jr. was clearly not himself. He has poor shooting nights where he's out of a funk when he's fully healthy. It felt like he was having a hard time lifting his shoulder past a certain point, and nobody else on the floor was prepared to make and take the contested shots that was going to be needed. And it wasn't even defensively. It wasn't even about stopping Kawhi Leonard from dropping 39 or James Harden from dropping 35. The Clippers get it from anywhere. They had 4 starters essentially hit 20 points. The only one that didn't is Chris Dunn, their defensive specialist, who takes like 5 shots a game. All 4 starters, from Zubats to Kawhi to James Harden to Norman Powell, they can get it from anywhere on the court at basically any time. And each guy's basically evenly distributing it when they want to. They're all taking between 12 and 17 shots. They're converting on the majority of them. Their percentages from beyond the arc are fine. And the Nuggets just don't seem to have an answer. They're tissue paper defensively. The one thing we thought they were going to be able to do in this series was score. Hell, if they don't play defense, at least they can score. And now they can't buy a basket to save their lives. It's maybe blasphemous to say about a team 3 games into a series that's down 2-1 with opportunities to return, with an opportunity to return back home still. I think this game, in essence, decided the series for the Nuggets. And I think that it felt like you could feel some of the resolve and the energy and the passion that we saw in the 3-game end to the season after Michael Malone's firing. It feels like that's starting to fade away, and there are some cracks and fractures forming within this roster. It's never too late, I suppose. Again, if they get a win in LA in Game 4 and they come back tied at 2-2, there's always a chance. But at some point, they're going to have to win multiple games in a row, and I just don't feel like this team has shown that they've got the capability to do it. And frankly, the Clippers might just be better, and that adds a whole extra layer to it. When it comes to the Colorado Avalanche, we talked about the Nuggets with a couple of painful losses. The Avs have had 2 of the most heartbreaking losses of the season happen in back-to-back games, in back-to-back overtime games in the playoffs. And it's starting to raise questions in my mind about whether or not, once again, Peter DeBoer is out-coaching Jared Bednar, and the Avalanche as a team who I think are better. I think the Avalanche are the better team, but they're not playing like it, and they don't look like it. And ultimately, that's kind of all that matters. It's essentially you are what your record says you are. You are what you look like when you're out there in the postseason. And right now, the Avs don't look like the better team, regardless of what paper may say or I may feel I know deep down. And we talked about all the changes that needed to be made before last game, mixing up the D-line pairings, trying to do something to shore up the second line, fixing the power play, which got even worse somehow after all those adjustments. And what more adjustments now are needed? Well, I think we're getting some of those. It's already happened and come out at morning skate earlier today that Gabriel Landeskog, the man who hasn't played hockey in 3 years, but somehow was the best forward on the ice for the Avs in Game 2. He was getting in work on the second line with Brock Nelson and Valeri Nichushkin. He was also working on the top power play unit, which feeds into something that I talked about with you all yesterday and maybe even the day before about if you got to throw the Monstars unit out there on the top power play line, get the big guys out there, put Val, Gabe, Nate, Kale, and Lecky out there and just do something. There's no reason to have Valeri Nichushkin or even Gabe Landeskog on the second power play unit at this point. One, you need to jumpstart the production. Prior to last night's last game, the Avalanche were 14-4 when Valeri Nichushkin scores a playoff goal. Well, he scored one and they lost to make it 14-5. But if that's the trend where you're still betting at 3-1 betterment when Val scores a playoff goal, put him out there on the top power play line and try to let him make something happen. Okay. Gabe Landeskog, who I already said looked like the best forward on the ice in Game 2, put him up there on the second line. That's been abysmal. Okay. And then shift it around on the third line and figure it out. They have got to respond in this game tomorrow night and even the series at 2-2 before things come back because if they don't, it's gonna be unfortunate before things go back to Dallas. Because if they let this series get away from them and they fall down 3-1, I don't know that the Avs will come back from that. I know the Nuggets won't come back from that. The Nuggets go down 3-1, barbecue chicken, baby. Moving on to next season. The Avs, I guess in theory they have a better chance, but it's not much better. The Dallas Stars are a sick, nasty team. They're physical, they're tough, they're big. Their forward grouping is as deep as you can find in the playoffs. Their goaltender in Jake Ottinger has operated with very little resistance and has not looked uncomfortable for the majority of this past season, this playoff series. And even without Miro Heiskanen, their best defenseman, who might be coming back at the tail end of this series, they're operating just fine because the Avalanche aren't finding ways to get quality pressure on them. So this game 4 tomorrow night, just like I said, last night's game for the Nuggets, in my opinion, decided the series. I think this game tomorrow night for the Avs not only decides the series, but could have a massive impact on the future of Jared Bednar as the head coach and the direction that they trend as a Stanley Cup hopeful franchise. All right, on the way out here, I want to make sure I get to some of your comments. There were so many of them during last night's show that I didn't get to, and because we were just limited on time and resources and whatnot. But you've all had a chance to sleep on it. The Jahdae Barron pick, Nuggets, Avs, Shedeur Sanders falling out of the first round. Whatever's on your mind, hit me with it. Let's roll. What do we got here from Jason? They truly went best player available in the first round. I was initially mad with Hampton on the board, but I've come around. Jason, again, that's kind of what I was getting at when it's hard in some ways to knock the drafting of a player who Daniel Jeremiah and others had ranked as a consensus top 10 player, not by position, but overall player on a big board in the draft. And he falls to you at 20, adding quality players to your roster. If you hit on the picks and they match the fit, which there's no reason to suggest that Jahdae Barron wouldn't fit in well alongside Patrick Surtain, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan in that secondary, with Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones on the back end and kind of trying to recreate your no-fly zone 2.0. That worked out pretty well. And let's not forget, in 2014, with cornerbacks established in Aqib Talib and Chris Harris, the Broncos drafted Bradley Roby in the first round, and he helped turn that defense from great to truly elite. Was he the premier star key member? No, but he was a member. Okay. And I know he has a memory that a lot of other Broncos fans don't like to remember, but let's keep it to the 2014 early on, So listen, I get it with Jahdae Barron. I understand that running back is still a need. And I think they will absolutely, if they don't address the running back position tonight in rounds 2 or 3, Jason, you should go back to being angry face emoji, because that's where I will be at. But until then, we'll see. They get Henderson and the world is back in alignment. Yep, basically. I agree with you on that. And if Henderson is gone, or if they don't trade up to get him, whatever, if it's Quinshon Judkins, if it's Devin Neal, if it's Kevin Johnson, if it's DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, if it's somebody that's in that, second round grade, maybe third round grade in the third round type of guy, then at least we'll be in wait and see mode at that point. From Clayton, a spitting image of PS2. I absolutely love how now we have 3 shutdown corners, Moss, PS2, and our rookie. Yeah. And again, Riley Moss was a third round pick, and the Broncos seem to have hit on a nice fit with him. He kind of took on this like white shadow moniker, because you don't see a lot of white cornerbacks, frankly, in the NFL. That's just a fact. And he would wear the long white sleeves. Okay. And if you've got a healthy and performing Riley Moss with Patrick Surtain, Jaquan McMillan, I think, was underrated as a slot corner, and he at times was one of the better corners on the team underneath PS2, even if he wasn't getting the recognition for it. The other thing about Jahdae Barron, you can move him around. He can play inside. He can play outside based on the scouting reports that have come out since the draft pick. And if they wanted to, he's got the physical size and the skill set to play at safety if needed. So you can have him at dime, you can have him at nickel, you can slide him in at safety if there's injury or depth concerns there, or he slides into your CB2 spot alongside Patrick Surtain, and Riley Moss becomes one of those move around guys. And that really pushes the Chris Abrams, Drain, Levi Wallace type characters back closer to where they should be, which is like emergency depth pieces more so than like, hey, we're one injury away kind of guys. From Jeff, Sanders is not nor ever truly was a first-round QB, despite all the media wanking. Also, great value for Denver. Doesn't fix our run. Yep, your run. Yeah, okay. So, Shedeur Sanders was not nor ever truly was a first-round QB. I see where you're going with that, and this was kind of like pretty widely considered a weak quarterback class, despite the fact you're always going to see QBs go because teams just need more it. But I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a bad quarterback. I truly believe that he has a skill set that can be utilized at the NFL level. And there are a lot of quarterbacks, Jeff, that would fit your description of what you're trying to draft Shedeur at, and they still get drafted in the first round. There are quarterbacks that get drafted in the first round that don't have a first round grade on them. Most recently, Bo frickin' Nix was a second or third round graded quarterback by a heavy number of NFL draft evaluators and talent scouts. And he turned out pretty well too. So we're going to have to wait and see where Shedeur goes and what kind of opportunity he's going to get. But one thing's for sure, that opportunity is going to be a lot more difficult now than it would have been if he had gotten selected last night. I bet Shedeur ends up in the CFL. Red wave of ketchup. That is fantastic. Red wave of ketchup. What does that even mean? Trace, please, I hope if he responds to that, I want a red wave of ketchup. I bet Shedeur ends up in the CFL. He would go down on signing day. He would be the most recognizable player to play or sign in the CFL in my lifetime. And I turned 32 years old 2 days ago. So that would be stunning. But if the further he falls, the harder it's going to be for him to carve out a name and a role for himself. And the quicker that rigmarole washing machine type of career that we see so many players get chewed up and spat out, he slips closer and closer into that category, regardless of what his last name is. Red wave. Roy, yes, the Avs are not looking good at all. It's so frustrating to me because you look at a situation where you say, okay, the Avs have led for all but 62 seconds of this series, and they're down 2-1. And there's two different ways you can go with that. On one hand, you can say, I mean, that don't freak out. They've led for the majority of this series. They just haven't had some good puck luck. One bounce here, the puck dies in front of Mackenzie Blackwood, and Blackwell's able to flip it up because the Avs lost it in translation there, and that's been the difference in the series. I don't buy that. One, I'm not even 100% convinced puck luck actually exists. I think it's like a convenient narrative to push away from we're just not doing the things we need to do. But I take it as a negative. You've led for all but 62 seconds in a series, and you can't find a way to close 2 games out of 3. That's a concerning thing. That's alarm bells going off in the hallway for me. And I think it's justified. So I'm glad that they made the adjustments they made before last game, even though they didn't pan out. I'm glad it looks like they're moving Gabe up to the second line with Val and Brock Nelson. And I'm glad they're potentially working him with the top power play unit. They have got to be nimble and mobile and shift and adjust to their game. Needed adjustments that have to be made to counterbalance what Dallas has done, because Dallas is doing it and it's working. That is the only way that you can be up 2-1 in a series without ever having the lead is if you're nimble and you're not flat-footed and you're adjusting in the moment situationally to give yourself an edge. And Peter DeBoer and the Stars are doing that. All right, looks like we got one more here from Lurker Troy. Lurker. Okay. All right. Most drafts usually are not what teams think they are 3 years ago and gone. Yeah, I mean, it's eventually, and this was an interesting draft overall, I think, because this is the final draft of the COVID era extra year of eligibility kind of drafts. You know, we're 5 years removed from the 2020 season. And you got a lot of older guys mixed in with some younger guys, and the NIL Wild West transfer portal bonanza that college football has become. It's more difficult, I think, to get true reads on certain guys because they're bouncing around from system to system, school to school, so much more factored in with the age fluctuations and things of that nature. I don't think there's a ton of confusion on Jahdae Barron, though. The guy does just flat out look like a stud. He's just the stud at the position that a lot of people, maybe even myself included, weren't maybe looking for in the first round. But look at what the Eagles draft best player available more than almost anybody I know. The Rams did it for a long time too. So, and look at what it's done for them. They have hit on enough BPAs and been able to lock them down and restock the cupboards year after year using that philosophy that it's turned them into Super Bowl contenders. The Eagles obviously coming just off of one. So the Broncos, maybe still have glaring holes and positions of need that need to be addressed. And I think that you'll see a running back and a defensive tackle tonight. And if you don't, I'm sure we're going to get a wacky explanation as to why. That's going to do it for today's show. We have the NFL draft rounds 2 and 3 coming up a little bit later tonight. And a lot of questions remain unanswered. Where does Shedeur go? Is it Cleveland? Is it Vegas? Is it the New York Jets? Is it the New Orleans Saints, who passed on him at number 9? I don't know. But the further he continues to slide, the more fascinating and polarizing that story is going to become. Avs got a huge game tomorrow night, as do the Nuggets, frankly. But I think one of those books is a little bit closer to the epilogue than the other. And the Broncos running back position, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, so many running backs. One of those guys is going to be wearing a Broncos jersey next season. I don't know which one it's going to be, but I think we find out in just a few short hours. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll catch you again tomorrow. I do what I love what I do in second nature to put in the work.